Hello, Steeler Nation, and welcome to your SteelerNation.com podcast. I'm your host, G.Stryker, and today we welcome back our favorite professional sports writer from Homistek.com, Hunter Homistek. Hunter, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well, man. Besides these lies in the opening month, favorite. Come on. I'm honored. I'm honored. Thanks, dude. Happy to be back. Always a good time chatting with you guys.
Yeah, and I know it's been a couple weeks. We try to get you on fairly regularly, obviously as often as we can. But funny enough, like every time we tend to set up these live vidcasts and podcasts, something huge breaks in the NFL. And today we just had our first $500,000 player in all of professional sports. And it's the first time the NFL has ever had the number one paid player. It was always MLB or NBA, but now Patrick Mahomes, big old $500 million potential contract. It looks like it comes out to $477 normally, but with the guarantees and the escalations with salary cap over the next 10 years, he's going to earn $500,000. What are your thoughts on that, Hunter?
It's insane, but my initial reaction was surprisingly, dude earned that. I wasn't super shocked. I mean, Mahomes I think he's far and away the best quarterback in the league right now. If there was a redraft of the NFL, he'd be the number one overall pick, I think.
Yeah.
If anybody earned it coming off a Super Bowl win, it's got to be this guy. I mean, he's ridiculous. He's super smart, athletic, got the arm. He's just the perfect NFL quarterback for today. The Chiefs have obviously had great success with him. So lock him up for 10 years. They probably would have locked him up for 20 years if they could have. I think they just want Mahomes forever now. So I like it, man. I love seeing this. And what's really funny about this to me is that normally when a guy gets paid this much, you hear a lot of, he didn't deserve it. He didn't earn it. Like, it's been a really positive reaction. I think everybody likes Patrick Mahomes, the person too, which is a really interesting facet of this. He just seems like such a good kid who really deserves that kind of money. So let's make it happen.
Plus, he's the first player now, or actually, he just won the Super Bowl MVP and the MVP of the league. He's the first player to ever win both before the age of 25.
That's insane.
So this is a value contract. Honestly, if you got to put your money where it's going to be invested, because he makes that whole team better. The way he can execute plays, his creativity, his ability to throw without even looking at a spot just because he knows that player is running a specific route and he's wide open. It's just something we haven't seen before, throwing left-handed because somebody's on his right hand.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy is just something like we've never seen. And for him to earn that kind of contract, like I'm with you, Hunter. I think it's very merited.
It is, man. And it's scary to think he's still getting better. I'm pretty sure he's still getting better. As good as he is, he's still super young and relatively inexperienced in the league. So there's every reason for the Chiefs to think that he has not reached his peak yet. And I'm sure they're banking on that. And I think the structure of the contract, you talked about it a little bit. There's a lot of built-in kind of safeguards for the Chiefs there, because a 10-year contract sounds on the surface. When I saw 10 years, the money, obviously was huge, but at the same time, I was like, I get it. It seems like every year somebody has the richest contract ever just because of the way this thing works. So the money was huge, but I was more fascinated with the 10 years. That is a long time to tie yourself to a player, especially one this young, this, like I said, relatively inexperienced. You don't exactly know which way he's going to go yet. They're banking on him improving or at least continuing to be what he is. And for 10 years, that's a long time. That's a lot of time for something to go wrong, but they have built in, some safeguards to help protect themselves. So on all sides, all the way around, I think this is just a smart play by the Chiefs, smart play by Mahomes. Should be a match made in heaven.
Should be. And also for one of our neighbors here in the AFC North, Cleveland Browns just came out with some interesting news today, and that is Olivier Vernon. Olivier Vernon being signed to a new contract. Looks like they freed up some cap, and he's also signed a no tag clause. So that's an interesting also thing that we didn't talk about here before this, is that Cleveland has a tough time retaining talent and bringing talent in. And to ask for a no tag clause means that Vernon probably doesn't want to be around again after this contract.
That's pretty much exactly what it says to me as well. I think Olivier Vernon knows his time is coming to an end in Cleveland, and he's okay with that. He's going to play it out. He he hasn't been what the Browns expected anyway. I mean, his best seasons were for sure. Just knocked my mic over. Rookie move here talking about the Browns.
Steeler Nation.
Got the
anything can happen.
Dude, you start talking about the Browns and you start acting like the Browns, all inexperienced and unprofessional over here, knocking stuff over. Man, just simply mentioning the Cleveland Browns tanks the production value of everything. That's how it goes when you talk about them.
But back to Oliver Vernon.
Yeah. Anyway,
Oliver Vernon.
Anyway, Olivier, yeah, like I was saying, his best seasons definitely seem to be behind him at this point. Or he's just a terrible fit within the Browns organization, as many hyped up hot free agents are when they get there. It's certainly not the first time we've seen the Browns make a splashy move and the guy didn't live up to where he was elsewhere within the Browns organization. So it's not super surprising, but to me, like, looking at the next steps of what this means, what it means to me is that they want Myles Garrett. They're working on how are we going to pay Myles Garrett when we have to. So they're trying to free up that space, that money, to make sure they can keep Myles Garrett around, because number 1 overall pick. And as much as Steeler Nation hates this guy, and maybe some of that's merited, the dude can play some football like that. He's a beast and he's worth keeping around.
Yeah, he definitely can. And my worry was with the Browns freeing up that kind of cash was that maybe they're trying to make another counter offer here to Jadeveon Clowney to bring him in with Garrett. But, you know, as we discussed and started talking about this earlier, you know, I think it would be a good personnel move. They definitely wanted him in there. You know, I don't think he wants to play for the Browns because Browns offered him a boatload of cash in the beginning of free agency and he turned it down. And I think it's just because he doesn't want to play for the Browns. But, I mean, now we're at the point where the top defensive end edge rusher of free agency is still sitting without a team 4 months after free agency began. And that's unheard of in this free agency, the way free agency is and the way that edge rushers are so highly rated.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an insane offseason in that regard. And obviously the coronavirus pandemic's playing a huge part of that as far as just not being able to get the looks at guys that you want. Negotiations aren't the same. Clowney is really interesting to me too. Like his career has been interesting in general, the way that he's kind of just been getting tossed around like he's not as valuable. I feel like he never exactly lived up to his draft type. And even now, like this many seasons, whatever, 5-6 seasons into his career that he is, people still see him as like that elite talent that I feel like he never actually showed that. I don't think he's ever had 10 sacks in a season. I don't think he's ever been exactly the guy, but he still is Jadeveon Clowney. So people still want to give him a shot, but he seems like a prime candidate for me. I'll put it this way. Seems like a prime candidate for me for whoever does pay up and get him is going to be disappointed with it.
Yeah, and you know, we'll have to see how it works out. But like I said, it's just such an odd thing right now, and it's something we've never experienced before, and we'll have to see where Clowney ends up. But right now, you know, who knows if it's going to be with the Browns? I know the the Raiders were also in the talks. Seattle's been in talks, so it's going to be interesting to see where he finally ends up.
For sure.
And moving on. Back to Steeler news, because that's what we are, the SteelerNation.com podcast. And Justin McGonigal, our website owner and sports writer, he came at us with an article here on Steelers training camp, and the Steelers get a training camp date being July 28th. So training camp date is set.
Nice. That's always nice. I mean, it's good. As much as we talk about, you know, regaining some normalcy and getting back to normal, getting things going, this stuff always feels good. I liked, you know, switching sports for 2 seconds, but like the Pirates just released their home schedule for this year. So it's good to see that people are still planning things out as if things will be normal. Whether they actually hold and are normal remains to be seen. You know, I think MLB is already having a lot of problems with testing, and teams have had to kind of cancel workouts and things like that because the tests aren't coming back fast enough. So there's a lot still that can go wrong. Like that's what I would caution anybody getting overly hyped. There's still a long way to go here, but it's nice to see that July 28th date is set and there is something on the calendar as far as the Steelers getting back after it and seeing what they got. They've got a lot to figure out too. The Steelers have had not much turnover as far as it goes this season. They should be pretty set. But I guarantee you they still want to get looks at especially these rookies, some of the new guys coming in, Stefan Wisniewski, I'm sure they want to see how he fits in and looks on the team. So it's going to be exciting, man. There's still plenty to talk about. When training camp finally opens, it's going to be all systems go.
And furthermore, in training camp, our other writer, John Walker, put out an article for us saying NFL considering reducing the training camp rosters from 90 to 75 to 80. So what are your thoughts now on having less players here now being able to compete for spots on team?
Yeah, ultimately, I think that's necessary, unfortunately, because there's so many guys who are those 75 to 90 players coming into camp that will make a run throughout camp and end up making the team. You know, we see it all the time. Duck Hodges, he got cut, obviously, actually, but then they saw enough in camp to bring him back when they needed him. Like, there's a lot of guys whose careers literally depend on training camp. So it's super unfortunate for those guys who aren't going to get that chance. And especially, I'm sure everybody remembers when the Steelers were signing all those XFL cast-offs whenever the XFL folded. A lot of those guys were probably banking on training camp to show what they got and to prove that they belong at the NFL level. So there's a lot of opportunity lost here. And who knows exactly what that could look like. I mean, we talk about Duck Hodges, but there's other guys. I mean, freaking James Harrison was one of those guys at one point that needed to prove out. Like, you don't know, those 75 to 90 guys, there could be a legitimate hidden gem that just doesn't get the chance this year. And then I don't know what that looks like. Next year, do they still get that chance? Do they just get cut and shipped away? Like, I'm not sure exactly what that looks like, but there are for sure going to be some casualties in this.
Yeah, and that's interesting points too, because what I really liked about the Steelers going out and getting XFL players meant they didn't have to utilize training camp bodies on players that they really couldn't vet as undrafted rookie free agents. And I thought that was a smart move because you've got players that you've got a lot of tape on and some NFL experience, definitely XFL experience tape too, to be able to see if these guys can play in the NFL. So I thought that was a really smart move, especially with COVID-19. You've got players that really don't have to get, brought up to what it is to be a professional ball player. You got those 5 XFL players that know what it's like to be a professional ball player. But the other contrast, like you're stating as well, I just had Robert Golden on the podcast last week, and he would not have made the team if he wasn't one of those 75 to 90s. I mean, he was a monster special teams player, undrafted rookie free agency, strong safety behind, Clark and behind Polamalu. It's like this guy wouldn't have even gotten a look. And he made the team because of those extra spaces. Special teams monster. 2 years later, he's special teams captain. Actually, a year and a half later, he becomes special teams co-captain. And the following 2 years, he's special teams captain. And he had a good career with the Steelers, solid spot starter, excellent special teams player, and a great guy. He was a great guy to talk to as well. But like you're saying with James Harrison, I mean, that's a guy that bounced around different teams' practice squads before he became Defensive Player of the Year. And
wow.
Yeah, it's going to hurt you this year. And I honestly hope that, the Steelers and other teams do their due diligence on undrafted rookie free agents that don't make that 75 to 90 slot this year, that could possibly be brought back next year. Hopefully COVID's gone and they'd be able to actually compete along with the undrafted rookie free agents, but hopefully giving them a chance for their football dreams and their football careers to come true.
For sure. It's going to be insanely tough. And I think you nailed the most crucial element of that. Hopefully COVID is gone next year. We don't know for sure that this isn't going to be a thing next year too. I mean, we really don't know what it's going to look like. So this season, it's going to be weird no matter what. This season's going to be really strange no matter what happens. But I feel like you're going to see teams for sure rely on experience over youth and potential. They're going to want guys that they can trust and just know their roles, execute their assignments, and make the plays that are scripted up. So I don't think you're going to see too many of those fringe guys. I mean, you talked about Robert Golden. I look at Cam Kelly last year was a guy who absolutely wouldn't have made the team without camp and everything, all those extra looks. I mean, it sucks for those guys. I really do feel for those guys because there are players out there who know they have what it takes to make that 53-man roster, and they might just not get the chance this year, man. It's super unfortunate.
It is. And now also the NFLPA, Jordan DeFigio did an article on SteelerNation.com as well. and they just voted that they do not want any preseason games now. So, right now it's already been dropped down to 2 games. Hall of Fame game has already been canceled, which I thought was going to be an advantage for the Steelers during COVID to have that extra week over top of the other teams to be able to get ready for the season. And that was kind of an unfair advantage, to tell you the truth, when you're trying to ramp up and you don't have OTAs, you don't have mini camps.
Yeah.
So now, no Hall of Fame game. 2 are definitely knocked off. And now NFLPA is just like, we don't want to play any preseason games. So what are your thoughts on that, Hum?
I'm not surprised off the bat. I think you could kind of see that one coming as far as how their vote would go. With the Steelers, again, the Steelers have very little turnover. I think they'll be okay with this. I think as far as teams go, it's an advantage for the Steelers going in. The less looks everybody gets, the better that works out for the Steelers, because there's going to be basically the same team that was on the field last year with Ben on the offense. Obviously, I don't think he'll have any problems learning the playbook. I think he'll be okay. And I think Tyson Alualu will be totally fine filling in for Hargrave as well. So I'm not super worried about that level. But again, you talk about guys who need the preseason to prove themselves and to make the team. That's who all this hurts. I can't imagine being a rookie or being one of the unsigned guys, being an XFL guy that was planning on this, working your butt off all summer through a pandemic, and then literally not getting the opportunity to show what you can do. That I mean, you can't just tell the coaches, look, here's tape from my backyard, just watch me. Like, they want to see that in-game performance. I mean, it's crazy, unfortunate for those guys. I feel for them, but ultimately it's a business. You got to play by the rules. And if that's how it's going to look, the Steelers are going to find a way around it. And I think that's going to be relying on veteran guys who know what they're doing in the system.
And that's a great point. And then the counterpoint to that too, Hunter, is you've got your young teams in the league. You've got a lot of teams with brand new quarterbacks, Cincinnati being one, Cleveland also being a young team with a young quarterback. They need those reps. I mean, it's going to be difficult. I mean, obviously right now it looks like training camp is still going to go, but training camp usually goes for about 15 days and then it starts overlapping with preseason.
Yep.
And starting on, if everything still starts on July 28th, they're going to get their training camp reps. But the weird thing is going to be now is if they do cancel all 4 preseason games, it makes 0 sense to start training camp on July 28th.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like you got to go 15 days out from your September game. So now you're looking at mid-August.
Yeah.
Move training camp back another 2 weeks.
That's a good point.
That's because otherwise they're going to start training camp. They're going to do their 15 to 18 days of training camp, whatever it is. I can't remember the exact numbers because you got weekends and stuff that sometimes you're on, sometimes you're off. And now without even, you're usually off too the days and the day before you were playing preseason games.
Yeah.
So now they're going to have a point where you get to the end of training camp, you still got 2 games left of preseason. So essentially, like, why are they just going to not do anything for those 2 weeks? It would make more sense just to have them training camp all the way up until the start of the season. And then maybe up until like have that first week of the season, then to be the week that the roster is cut down and then you're preparing for that first game.
Yeah.
So ideally that's probably the best way out. So 3 weeks out, you're still looking at mid-August, pushing it back about 2 weeks.
For sure. A lot of interesting options there, man. I love the point you made too about Joe Burrow. I wonder if the Bengals are rethinking letting Andy go, if they're kind of wishing that they had kept Andy around for a little veteran stability. That makes
0 sense to me. I'm with you, Hunter. That makes 0 sense.
I wanted the Bengals to keep Andy before this from a Bengals perspective. Like, I thought it would make sense regardless to keep Andy around. But now, especially, I can't imagine Burrow's getting the kind of reps he needs, man. I understand he's a remarkable talent. His last season at LSU was absolutely one of the best college football seasons ever. Like, there's no doubt the dude has talent, but there is no replacement for experience in the NFL. And I just wonder if he's actually going to be ready because, man, you get these young quarterbacks and you throw them to the wolves too fast and they falter. It could shatter his confidence right away. It could do any number of things to him and just mess him up for good. So I think the Bengals are certainly rethinking that strategy and maybe wishing that they hadn't done that. Or maybe Burrow is just the stud that they think, and he's going to blow us all away and be the next $500 million man in the NFL.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping not, since he's in our division. But
right.
But like you were saying too, it's rookie quarterbacks usually get 4 preseason games against some starters in the first half of games to at least get an idea of what it is to be in an NFL quarterback in an NFL game. Now he's going to be launching into his first game full speed against a defense of starters that knows what they're doing.
Yep.
You know, it's going to be a rude awakening for any rookie quarterback to be able to prepare. Like, yeah, you're fine. You're going to get your reps in training camp, but you got to remember, in training camp, you're wearing a red jersey. You can't get hit.
Yep.
It's like, this is going to be the first time he ever takes a hit will be in a meaningful NFL game. And how is he going to react to that? How is he going to react to how quick the game is, how fast they come at him? I think it's going to be really difficult for rookies to be able to adjust to that, especially rookie quarterbacks just this year.
Yeah, any position is going to struggle with it. But the funny thing about this conversation to me is, like, we're talking about Burrow's just play on the field. Yeah. How's he going to adjust to everything else? The media circus is going to be crazy whenever this comes back, because usually these guys would be talking all through training camp, rookie OTAs and everything right now. He would have a comfort level on a normal year already with reporters, but he hasn't been exposed to that yet at all. So when the floodgates finally open, how's he going to handle that sudden influx of having a camera in your face everywhere you go? After every game, good or bad, you've got 12 dudes swarming you in the locker room wanting to talk to you. How's he going to handle all of that? Probably pretty well. He does seem poised in that regard, I think. Yeah. But the funny thing is, you can think that until you get there. It's much like the play on the field. You can think you got it under control, but until you actually experience, because I remember last year I was talking to Devin Bush near the end of the season, like week 16 or so, like definitely towards the very end of the season. And I said, man, like, your play on the field obviously has been exceptional as a rookie for the Steelers, but what's been difficult for you so far? And he didn't hesitate. He said the media. He's like, all the media, all the extracurricular stuff. It wasn't what I was expecting. It's been more stress and more work than I expected on that front. Everything away from the game of football. So, like, these super hyped rookies, and Bush obviously was hyped for the Steelers, but he wasn't hyped like Burrow is going to be hyped in Cincinnati. That's a different level. Bush, I feel like, had the advantage of playing on an exceptional defense last year, where you had guys like TJ Watt and Minka helping take that shine away from Devin Bush. And as much as that kind of made people forget how good of a season Bush actually had, I think that was a blessing for him, because if it was just him going out getting 110 tackles, you know, he would have been the guy that cameras were all over every game. Yeah. But instead you had TJ and Hayward and Minka doing stuff and kind of dispersing the room, so to speak, helping to take some of the shine away from Devin. I think that really helped him out. But in Cincy, who's going to take the shine away from Burrow, man? Nobody. He's going to have to deal with that. Yeah.
And bringing it back to Pittsburgh as well, like, we know last year, moving up to the top 10 to grab Bush in the draft, he was going to be a quick starter. He was going to be an impactful player. This year, didn't have a first-round draft pick. Thank you for Miami Dolphins for giving us Minka Fitzpatrick. I think it's the best trade ever. But starting from the second round back, Steelers didn't draft any player that they're looking to start this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
if Dotson shows he's a freaking monster at guard,
True.
Bonus. If you know, if McFarland shows he can get in on third downs or get in as a thunder and lightning with that quick attack, I mean, that's a bonus. Same thing with Claypool. Claypool coming in maybe on fourth receiver, which is probably where he's slated to be, like we talked about in a previous podcast.
Yeah.
But also maybe if they start utilizing that height mismatch in the red zone, I mean, that's another bonus. But these aren't guys that the Steelers drafted to be starters this year. Everything is a bonus. They are, but they were drafted because they're phenomenal special teams players. Yep. I mean, I talked with Dotson. I talked with Davis, both great special teams guy. Claypool is an insane special teams guy. And that's
which is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, he's a gunner, and he loves being a gunner, and he's also so big, they have him in on blocking sets for field goal team and punt team. Yep. So, I mean, this guy is just outrageous how talented he is, and how Notre Dame utilized him, and Highsmith as well. I mean, they brought him in because he's going to be a monster on coverage teams. So
it's no coincidence, man. No coincidence that the Steelers did that and drafted guys who are phenomenal on special teams, knowing the season was probably going to be kind of weird. The preparation was kind of going to be weird. Learning special teams is a lot easier than learning the route tree for Claypool. So they understood, let's at least get him some NFL experience, let him feel the speed of the game, let him get acclimated and comfortable. Then when he's ready, we can start throwing him in the way we really want.
Yeah. And I know you and I have had some conversations in earlier podcasts speculating where the Steelers are going to be putting Matt Filer.
Mm-hmm.
Now the Steelers know where they're going to be putting Matt Filer. Brandon Wallace wrote a nice article for us. He's our editor, also sports writer, and he states that Matt Filer will open training camp at left guard. So we were speculating that. We know that there's a lot of depth talent at that right tackle spot with Okafor and with Banner. So now with Wisniewski, I guess they brought into play left guard, but, you know, he's a vet. I mean, honestly, I don't see him as a full season starter, a 16-game starter, but I see him as a valuable spot starter if there's ever any injury inside, that at all three inside spots, actually, because he's a center as well. And which is something that Steelers really didn't have a good backup center. They had a backup center, but this guy is actually a good backup center. Somebody that's going to really excel if something happened to Pouncey, something happens to DeCastro, and now Matt Filer. So what are your thoughts, A, on the Matt Filer competition here at guard, and also, you know, who are we looking at now to start at right tackle?
Yeah, well, that's definitely the second layer of the discussion, right? I think Matt Filer earned a starting position, no doubt. The dude's been phenomenal for them. He even played left guard last year against the Rams to help contain Aaron Donald, so he can obviously do that very well. I think Wisniewski, like, just doubling back on that topic real quick, he's pretty clearly the BJ Finney replacement to me, where you don't necessarily need him to start, but when he needs to start, you've got a solid. I think, aren't the Steelers like some ridiculous 9-0 or something when BJ Finney starts? I saw a stat last year.
Wow.
Like, I don't know. Look it up. It could have been a fake tweet, or I could be misremembering, but I swear I saw something like that where it's just like, Finney, like, you don't decline whenever you have to play him. It's not like a bad thing that BJ Finney has to play. So I think that's what they feel they got in Wisniewski, where if something happens, and you talked about Pouncey getting injured, maybe DeCastro getting injured, these guys are getting a little older, maybe a little susceptible to that. So it's really good insurance, like high level insurance too. But Filer for sure earned a starting role. And I think opening up that right tackle between Okorafor and Banner, that's just fun, man. Those are two big, talented dudes. And I read on your I don't know if it was you guys. I think you guys did do a breakdown of who will start between them.
Yeah.
It's tough to call, man. They each have certain attributes that are better. You know, Okorafor's footwork is incredible. He's super quick. He was coming off a shoulder injury too, which I feel like everybody forgot about that. They're like, well, why didn't he look good in the preseason? Well, the dude was playing with one arm. Like, like I don't think anybody looks too good playing with one arm at right tackle. So they're not, the Steelers for sure are not giving up on Okorafor, and I've seen him all over social media putting in work all offseason. Just like Zach Banner, though. Like, let's not discredit what Zach Banner's doing. He's leaning out. His body looks as good as it's ever looked, for sure. And you can't, 6'8", you can't teach that. The dude's just a monster, and he's physically intimidating. Some of his tape from last year when he got to play is super dominant, man. Like, the plays where if he can square you up, you're done. You're just done.
Yeah.
He's super powerful. So the Steelers love that. Again, it's a good problem to have for the Steelers, man. I think either one of those guys can be the starter, and I would feel okay with that.
Yeah. And it's like you've got the old Mike Tomlinism, 2 dogs, 1 bone. And you've got 2 alpha dogs with 1 bone. And both of them are extremely talented. And it was interesting how we were lucky to even get Banner in, just because Indianapolis chose not to develop him or just decided to go a different direction with their new coaches. Yeah. But he is a Steeler. I mean, it's the reason why. I mean, this guy's never played in Pittsburgh before, comes in as the extra tackle, and Steeler fans just start going nuts. And it's just the size of the guy. I mean, 6'9", 370, 380. I mean, this guy is enormous. I mean, he's a man among men when he steps on the field. And obviously, I don't think he has the handwork and the footwork, like you're saying, as well as Chooks. But he's just going to dominate the person in front of him. Yeah. That's his job, is to dominate the guy in front of him.
He has the stuff you can't teach, for sure. Yeah. And Okorafor, meanwhile, is a more kind of polished product, getting to that real polished and technical level. So it's kind of brute force versus technique. But obviously, I'm not discrediting, Banner's technique or Chooks' brute force. They both got that too. But it's a fun competition, man. I lean towards Chooks for some reason in my mind. I just lean towards Chooks because I feel like he was drafted to be that initially. I feel like he's been getting groomed for that whereas Banner was never necessarily seen as a starting tackle and will certainly have to just flat out earn it. He'll have to be so good that the Steelers just can't pick him or can't not pick him.
Yeah.
So that's where they're at. Again, good problem to have, man. And if you need to rotate them or something based on matchups, good problem to have, because I feel comfortable with both guys.
Nice. And also, I just thought of something, and I just want to run it through you too. Next year, Villanueva comes up for a new contract.
Mm-hmm.
Can we be looking at Chooks and Banner being the two starting bookend tackles next year?
That's a good question. That's a really good question.
Or even Filer moving out. I mean,
that's what
so many options with these three players, which are good players that, Filer's also a free agent next year too. So
yeah, right.
They're going to eventually have to be paying him like a starter, since he's locking down the starter spots now.
Yeah.
At two different positions, though. Fortunately, guard is a cheaper position to pay than tackle.
Yeah. And Dotson to me looks like the future at guard for sure. I love what I saw from him on tape. I think he projects well at the NFL level. Mm-hmm. We may look at him as the steal of that draft for sure at one point.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. He's very Ramon Foster-esque with a little bit more polish than Ramon had coming out of college, because obviously Ramon wasn't drafted. Yeah. And Foster, I mean, he was actually a mid-round, fourth round. We had got
yeah.
Yep. So I mean, he was obviously more of a polished product.
Yeah, and
small town, getting a all pro or all American accolades.
Yeah.
It's huge.
And love Ramon, love the big ragu, man. But Dotson's got athleticism that Ramon never had too, unfortunately. Like Ramon just never moved exactly like Dotson, or had that just pure killer stuff that I've seen from Dotson as far as just obliterating guys. He could be like he does some like Quentin Nelson level stuff on tape, which is crazy praise for sure. I'm not saying he's going to develop into that, but yeah, we'll see. I see what the Steelers saw in him, at least. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, and we have another article out from Jordan DeFigio, who has a great piece out, more of something like an upbeat piece, and I want to share this with you here on the screen. Oh, that's the wrong one.
Oh,
this up. It's all technology here, and I want to be as I'm running my own AV switcher as I'm hosting the show, so this is a
producer and host.
Takes me back to my radio days.
Yeah.
But the Jordan DeFigio did a great article about hope in a seemingly hopeless time, and so many times too, Hunter, and we've discussed this in the past, that Ben has really done a lot of charity work, his canine work, where he buys a canine for every single away team's police force that he plays in during a season. That's a huge program that he's done since he was a rookie.
Yep.
And now he's working here with Vance McDonald, and they're in on the Convoy of Hope. And the Convoy of Hope is a faith-based nonprofit whose main goal is to provide food for anyone that needs it. So this was a big, big deal for our quarterback that we love, and who's really shown that he's grown up since his earlier days and still going out and helping the community.
That's killer, man. I love seeing stuff like this. And I think Ben and Vance for sure make a perfect team on this. Both very Christian, both very into that lifestyle and the giving kind of nature. I mean, Vance was telling me last year that he actually runs the team's Bible study. So
cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he was kind of leading that and took on that role, and it helped him kind of develop as a leader, because he was a new guy to the team, relatively new addition to the team. So it was cool to see him step up into that role so fast. But he took it very seriously, man. Like when we talked about it, you can tell it means a whole lot to him, and for him to be able to spread that word and to connect with his teammates on that level is huge to him. So it doesn't surprise me at all to see him doing this kind of community work too. But one thing I want to say, scroll back. Yeah, that picture.
Well, yeah, dude, this one. Yep.
Dude, Ben is huge. Like Vance McDonald's huge, and Ben got him outsized here. Like you forget why exactly he's called Big Ben. That's a monstrous dude. And is that Vance's, is that his hair, or is that a quarantine beard?
No. It looks like it's almost a quarantine mullet, but it looks like it's probably a beard.
I know, that's what I'm thinking, man. He stole Ben's beard, I think.
Yeah, because Ben did get it shaved down. Let's get it down here in the other picture of him. I know he's down here on the ground. If we can get Well, he's got a little bit. Nope, that's his hair.
It's his
coming
hair.
out
All right.
behind his ears.
All right.
See, right here on the podcast, we can work out the audio visual to see exactly if that is it beard or is it hair. But he's got a beautiful COVID mullet going on.
That's what you need from us. We will dissect Steelers mullets all day if you want.
And both of their wives also getting involved. So a great piece. Thank you very much, Jordan, for reminding us that, good things are still happening even during these really tough times. And thank you so much to the Steelers themselves as well that are donating their times to help make our communities better. So.
Yeah, that's so killer, man. I love seeing stuff like that. And the title was good. Hope in a seemingly hopeless time. Like, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
I have that song that I found love.
Yeah. Nice.
It's like always going through my head when I read that title. So I'm really got the disco beat on.
Nice.
So now we're going to go to my article on SteelerNation.com from G.Stryker, and I had a commentary piece. I am pissed. The NFL came out with their ruling on Spygate 2.0, and I said it's official. The NFL is okay with cheating.
Yeah.
And the problem is now this is the third time the NFL has been documented cases of cheating against the Patriots with no real repercussions. And this one, I will dare to say, it's even less of a punishment than they got during the first Spygate. So first Spygate happened, and they got nailed with, they lost their first round draft pick. At the time, they still had 2 draft picks that round because they had one earlier, but they lost their 31st one or 32nd because they either won the Super Bowl or they were up there. I think they won the Super Bowl that year. But so they lost their first round draft pick, $500,000 fine to Bill Belichick, and $1 million, another fine. I think all the fines came out to $750,000. I think $250,000 to pay. I mean, come on, money fines do zero.
They don't matter. They don't matter.
And then we had Spygate, we had Inflategate. They lost another draft pick from that. Yeah. And, Brady gets suspended for 4 games, but the next season, not immediately when it happened in the AFC conference game to make it to the Super Bowl, when their fumble rating was 2 standard deviations away from any other team. So any statistician can look at that number and say, something fishy is going on in New England. Yeah. The fumble rate is 0 over 3 years. Yeah. And it was because they doctored their own footballs. And they knew they were cheating because after they get them tested, they take them to another room, deflate the footballs, then bring them onto the field.
It's crazy, man.
How does Bill Belichick get a pass on that? Because I even stated a quote from Roger Goodell, the reason why he was punished so much for the first Spygate was because in Goodell's words, Coach Belichick not only serves as the head coach, but also has substantial control over all aspects of New England's football operations. His actions and decisions are properly attributed to the club. And then Deflategate happens, the first press release, Bill doesn't know anything about it. I'm like, what the hell is that all about?
Of course.
So I don't know, and then you also got to continue, like, they won a Super Bowl for Deflategate. They had 3 Super Bowls in the hip pocket for Spygate because Walsh came out and stated they were taping back in 2000. And now they've won 3 more Super Bowls. They got caught red-handed recording again. And what happens? They don't lose a first-round draft pick. They lose a third-round draft pick in a year they need to draft a first-round draft pick to find a quarterback.
Of course.
That's bull crap.
Of course.
Absolute bull crap.
Dude, I'm super conflicted on this because so many levels of this. Look, the Patriots cheated. There's zero doubt. It's been documented, like you said. That is out there, 100% positive they cheated. It makes me wonder how many other teams are doing it that haven't been caught. I know Steelers fans don't want to hear things like this, but I feel like the Patriots are just the teams that are getting caught because, like, I take it back to I used to cover MMA for about 8 years before I started covering football and everything. Everybody cheats or tries. And everybody is a blanket term for sure, not everybody, but you're always aware if your competitors are cheating and you're going to look at how they're cheating and try to duplicate that because, as the saying goes, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, right? Whenever you're at this level, that extra push can literally make the difference. And would you sacrifice a 3rd-round pick if you knew it meant you were going to the Super Bowl? Of course you would. 100% of the time you would take that risk. The fact that Goodell is being so soft with the punishments just tells me that it's going to keep happening. That's all this is. I mean, like you said, the money doesn't matter. The money didn't matter.
$1 million fine to a team that's $1 billion industry. That's a trickle in the pocket. Now we look at MLB that just had their own scandal for stealing signs.
Yep.
Same thing, same exact thing. And that team won World Series and made it back to the World Series again. I mean, they are a talented team. Houston Astros are a talented team,
For sure.
MLB is hardcore on cheating ever since the Black Sox scandal back in 1919, when, you know, the local gambling rings were paying players way more than they would make anyway for being MLB players to throw a World Series to Cincinnati.
Yep.
Since that time, MLB has been hardcore. You cheat, you're out for life.
Yeah.
You're done. And we're going to give you severe punishments. And we're talking about those 2 managers on the Houston Astros were suspended for the year.
Yep.
Astros then fired them.
Yep.
And then they were fined $5 million, which is more substantial than I mean, it's a smaller business than the NFL, and they get fined $5 million for that team as opposed to $1 million from the multi-billion-dollar NFL, the cash cow king of all pro sports in America. And they get drafted their top 2 picks for the next 2 years. Now, if you're going to stop cheating, unless you start doing suspensions to coaches and severe draft pick knocks, teams are going to do it because they've already shown they are benefiting and winning Super Bowls because they're cheating.
Absolutely, man. And the one thing I will say, the MLB did a better job for sure. They needed to strip the title. They needed to strip the title flat out. I mean, if an Olympic athlete gets busted post gold medal win, they strip your medal. I mean, that's the way that you say this isn't okay. We take away what you want. And with the Astros, dude, it was way, way worse than what the Patriots did, in my opinion. I mean, that's like, in such an individual-based sport, if you know what pitch is coming, that's a ridiculous advantage. Like, that's literally cheating on a new level to me. So, like, for sure, the Astros needed to be stripped of that World Series win in my mind. And that says, above all, if you cheat, you don't get to reap the rewards for cheating, man. Like, we're not okay with this. So if you throw an asterisk next to some of the Patriots Super Bowls, you think they're going to keep filming? I really don't think so. I really don't see that they would keep doing it. But until they do that, they're gonna.
Yeah, I think they stopped filming. I think when they initially got caught, I thought they stopped filming for a few years, and then they started winning again with lower talented rosters. So you're like, hey, you know, this works. Let's go back to it. So, but one point, I mean, definitely it does help on an individual, one person versus one person thing in MLB for stealing signs, but it also does help for the quarterback to know what defense the other team's running. And
Absolutely.
if you've got the defensive signal, they can radio in his helmet, this is the defense.
Yeah.
And he's a smart guy. Brady knows if he's got man coverage versus zone coverage and where the blitz is coming from, if the blitz is coming.
Yep.
Then if he knows no blitz is coming, he knows he's got more time.
Yep.
And if you tell him the coverage is going to be zone versus man, he knows who's going to be open and where.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of what I was going to say. It's kind of the unfortunate part of this is that I genuinely do think Bill Belichick is one of the top 3 coaches of all time, and Brady is one of the top 3 quarterbacks of all time, undisputed. They probably didn't need to do this, but it's like we were saying, where when everybody is super competitive, sometimes that little push over the edge is just what makes the difference. So for me, there's an asterisk involved for sure, but I'm not willing to completely discredit their Super Bowls like I feel like a lot of Steelers fans will. That was still an insanely talented team regardless. I do think that contributed. To what level, I don't know. And it's all speculation, man. These proceedings, what we see in the media, what we know and read about it is a fraction of what the NFL and the people doing the investigations know about it. So who knows if everything's even been presented exactly right. I don't know. I'm not in the business of accusing people of cheating when I don't have all the facts. So I definitely see slight asterisks. But
we don't have to accuse them of cheating. They have cheated. Right.
Punished
3 times for cheating.
Yeah.
Now, as far as for the levels, and I understand the levels of cheating and how deep it got, we'll never know because they destroyed all of the information or all the tapes from the first time.
I know.
So, you know, that is questionable, and they had a congressional investigation at the time as well, because that affects the entire league if one team starts doing something like this. But I mean, and that was his defense the first time, was he misinterpreted the rule. I don't know how you misinterpret the rule when the rule strictly states you cannot tape opposing teams' signs.
Dude, they're smart dudes with a lot of money. They got the legal teams to they know, but they know exactly what they're doing. But like, to my point, what teams are cheating that haven't been caught? That's only why I have a problem with this, is because yes, the Patriots got caught and we know for sure, but that's exactly why the NFL needs to make an example out of them, because you don't just stop them from cheating, you stop everybody else who's also doing it. I guarantee you there's other teams doing it. It's not like the Patriots are the only team that thought about doing this or had, the gusto to go for it. I'm sure other teams are trying to do that. It's not like it's just the Patriots, but when you catch them red-handed and do it, like, make an example out of it and shut it all down. Don't just let it, like, now I'm just waiting for the next cheating scandal. Yeah.
And one other point I want to make, and this is why I see such a disparity when teams are caught cheating, is we go back to Bountygate with the New Orleans Saints. Sean Payton was the head coach. He didn't necessarily know about what Greg Williams was doing with the defensive team, giving them, bonus packages for knocking a guy out of the game, which is definitely against the rules. But still, Sean Payton, first offense, suspended for the year.
Yep.
He was a year out of football. Yep. Now, I don't know how the league, or, specifically Goodell, decided that the second time caught with the exact same offense, that Bill Belichick is not suspended for any amount of time.
Yeah. I'm with you, man. I'm with you.
That just doesn't make sense to me as a fan. It doesn't make sense to me if I was in charge of punishment for the league, if you want consistency in punishment. So, that's just the only thing that just does not sit well to me, is until you start suspending teams and drastically attacking their draft capital, this stuff is just going to keep continuing, because there's no real incentive to not cheating, which is why I said the NFL is okay with cheating.
Yeah, I think the difference with Bountygate, and this is unfortunate, doesn't make it any more right, was just that it was such a violent way to cheat. It was very easy it was such an easy way to convince people, like, this is horrible. Like, you got Brett Favre talking about the hit he took against the Saints being one of the worst hits he ever felt. I couldn't remember things for like a week. And this is also around the same time that the knowledge of CTE and how concussions affect players was really ramping up at that time too. So it was kind of the perfect storm of, okay, let's make an example out of the Saints right now as kind of this head trauma, all the things that go into it. We can use it as an example and really make a splash. But again, tying it back to the Patriots, why not do the same thing now? Cheating is cheating. Like, you can't, just because Bill Belichick's filming people and it's not violent, you're not hurting players, it's no more right.
So let's move on to Steelers time, Steelers stuff, and we're going to do what we love to do the most on the vidcast, is go over top 10 lists.
Woo!
So coming back over to SteelerNation.com, we're going to start off with Matt Papiernick's article, and his is ranking the top 10 running backs in Steeler history.
Ooh. Nice. There's a nice cluster at the top. Gotta be. Going to be a fun discussion at the top.
Yes, it is. So we'll start off with number 10. Oh, that's one of my personal favorites, and also somebody I personally got the pleasure to sit down and talk with on a podcast.
Yep.
Daryl Hodge. I mean, he was technically a halfback, but utilized as a fullback a lot.
Yep.
And actually was the first real lawsuit from concussions starting the entire CTE investigation.
That's what I was going to say. Coming off that Bountygate talk, kind of funny to start off with Daryl Hodge.
No, I know. Yeah. I know. But I mean, he was a guy that always stuck his head down in the pile, got those grind yardage. He just did a lot for the Steelers. Still had the ability to go out and catch some passes with his hands too.
Yeah.
But he was a big part of that team that was the Steelers teams that were just starting to make the playoffs again at the end of the 80s, with Bubby Brister at quarterback, and just kind of re-identifying themselves as a team that can actually succeed in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Hodge was a huge part of that team.
For sure. Good way to start off the list, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good start. Number 9, Rashard Mendenhall. Big draft pick. played in the Super Bowl. He doesn't, honestly, I don't think he gets a lot of the credit that he normally deserves, but that big fumble, a lot of Steeler fans know it's still in their mind from the Super Bowl because that was a huge turnover and turning point of that game. But what are your thoughts on Mendenhall?
Yeah, like you said, people remember the fumble for sure, but they forget that the Steelers would not have made the Super Bowl at all without Rashard Mendenhall. He's very good in those playoffs, and he's a very good player in general, but people will remember the fumbles, the Rashard spin and fall, all the jokes about him. I get that, but he was good, man. He really was. He probably deserves number 9 on this list. I'm trying to think of who else should be coming, but the Steelers, it's kind of funny talking about the Steelers running backs. It's a super top heavy list. I know the top 5 is going to be like aces and the rest is like,
Well, I know 2 that are going to be old timers, like guys that were on this team making Hall of Fames before they became
right.
70s.
Yeah. Right.
So, but we'll get to those. It'll be interesting to see where they're listed in. And the one was not only a running back, but the coach forever on our team.
Yes.
As a running backs coach, if some of your Steelers might remember that name, but when we get to it, I'm pretty sure it's going to be on this list. I haven't seen the list yet, honestly. To Hunter, I wanted it to be a surprise, like
nice.
You. Yeah. So I did not read this one early.
I'm just trying to think of 1, 2, 3, how that's going to go. I'm really excited to see that.
And that's the big coach,
Dick
Hoch. Not only did he play from 61 to 70, he was our running backs coach up through Bettis.
Yep.
All through the 70s teams, 80s teams, into the 90s and early 2000s. I mean, the guy was on our roster forever through 3 head coaches. I mean, that's an insane accomplishment for a position coach. But not only that, he was an amazing running back as well.
It says a lot about what they thought of him to keep him around that long. I mean, that's a huge honor, especially for a team like the Steelers who don't have turnover. You earn it. And once you're a Steeler, man, you're a Steeler for life. So clearly they loved what Dick Hoch embodied. Like you said, more known as a coach than a player, but for sure deserves a spot on this list because like I kind of alluded to earlier, there's not a ton of depth with Steelers running backs. There are some good surprises for sure. Yeah. But the depth really isn't that crazy. So Dick Hoch at 8, yeah, for sure.
He definitely deserves to be on that list in my mind. I know the Hall of Famers will be coming up here soon, but in the top 3. But Dick is a great choice and a great man too. Next one.
Oh,
here's the first Hall of Famer, John Henry Johnson.
That's too low. Come on, man.
That is. I honestly think it's too low, but I've got his helmet right here with his signature right behind me.
That's beautiful.
My old school Steelers number helmets. John Henry Johnson, hell of a running back. And one
absolutely.
of my all-time favorite old school players.
Maybe the last Steeler to lead the league in rushing too. I'm not sure. Is that a fact? It feels like a fact. Anyway, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. Yeah.
That's an interesting point because I remember Foster had that monster year and he was beat out by like a yard by like Emmitt Smith that year.
Yep.
And Bettis was always high, but I don't think he ever led the league.
I don't think he ever led the league.
Because Franco was playing with O.J. Simpson at the time and Campbell and tail end of Brown. I mean, these are guys that were always leading the league in rushing.
Yeah. John Henry Johnson had one of the most interesting careers, though. Definitely worth looking into if you're not familiar with him. He went to the CFL first because they paid him more, even though the Steelers drafted him in like the 2nd round. By the time he actually got back to the Steelers, the dude was like 87 years old and was still lighting it up. Like he was just a beast longevity wise. He was a really interesting character. He was like in his late or early 30s. I mean, when he came back, whenever a lot of people thought he was declining, and then he came to the Steelers and just started lighting it up again. So definitely worthy of the Hall of Fame and definitely worthy of some research if you're not super familiar with him.
And here, just reading this, I mean, this is a really interesting thing. He played in the CFL for 1 year because they gave him more money than the NFL.
Yeah.
He was the league's MVP as both an offensive and defensive star.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a hell of a football player. I mean, obviously he focused on being a running back in the NFL, but 3 consecutive Pro Bowls in Pittsburgh, oldest running back, over 1,000 yards at the age of 35, and also oldest running back to get over 200 yards in a game.
That's crazy.
He did so at 34 against the Browns, in which he outdueled Jim Brown. What a neat thing.
That's a decent feather in your cap to outduel Jim Brown.
Yeah. I mean, nobody was outdueling Jim Brown back then. He was the cream of the crop.
Absolutely.
running back class. But there's a reason Steeler fans go back and look up some read up on John Henry Johnson, because he was just an amazing player.
For sure.
Next, number 6, I accidentally flipped down below it. I didn't see it, but we'll see. Barry Foster, who we just talked about.
There you go.
Nearly led the league in rushing the 1 year, but he was one of those. Actually, he was kind of like an Emmitt Smith runner. He was between the tackles, ran hard, had enough wiggle to get open. Not really much of a pass catcher, but could run the screens, could run the swings, circle routes. Did you ever see Barry Foster run, or are you familiar with him?
Very briefly, for sure. I mean, I've gone back and watched highlights, but as far as seeing him live, not really. I was still too young at that point, but obviously he had the monster year that everybody knows. Just a super short career. He has kind of a weird career. Yeah. For me, he's too high on this list. I certainly can't put him over a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, but, I'm with you there. I definitely would have John Henry Johnson over Barry. I'd have John Henry Johnson in the top 5 no matter what.
For sure. And now if we're talking individual seasons, you can go with Barry's monster season and put it way up there. But as far as a career, it was not all that. A little disappointing.
But I remember it was right around 1650 in yardage that year.
Yeah.
And he still got outran by a couple yards by Emmitt Smith.
Hey, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? It's Emmitt Smith.
The all-time rushing leader of the NFL. I mean,
running behind
conversation to be in.
Yeah, running behind the best offensive line ever is a decent place to be.
Yeah, it is. So number 5 on the list. So now we see very fun. Rocky Bleier. I cannot be disappointed with a man that served in Vietnam, was told he might not even walk again, came back and became an incredible part of that 3-headed rushing attack with Frenchie Fuqua. And of course, the guy who's probably going to be around 1 or 2. Yeah. We'll mention here soon. But that rushing attack was phenomenal. And he had one of the biggest catches ever when he showed he could jump out of the stadium to reach up and catch that football in the Super Bowl to help him win a game.
Yeah. Unreal story, unreal Steeler. I mean, this is a merited pick right here at number 5. It may seem high if you just look at stats and everything. He was never the man in Pittsburgh. He's always kind of overshadowed by Franco for sure. But as far as what he represented for the team, you talk about a perfect 70 Steeler for those teams. Just a tough Grizzly dude who's not afraid to get hurt, not afraid to do whatever it takes to win. Rocky Bleier, and still very vocal with the team, still out there in the media, still doing his thing. I mean, Rocky Bleier is the man to this day.
And I had a great podcast with Rocky Bleier as well. Guys, go to SteelerNation.com podcast sites and check that out. That guy's just so fun to talk to because he will talk about anything, and he is so opinionated on the Steelers.
He's passionate. He's a passionate guy. That's what I love.
He is not only a player and a team leader, but he is a fanatic as well. And it's just so
absolutely
fun to talk to a guy like that too, that still sits back on Sunday, cracks a beer, and watches the Steelers play.
Yep. Absolutely. Here we go.
So now we're going to start getting into some big names here. And then number 4 might be a guy that played in a couple Super Bowls for us. We'll see.
I think it is. Yeah.
Willie Parker.
It's got to be.
Super Bowl XL. Now, that one interesting stat on Willie Parker that I remember is he was undefeated in the playoffs as a starter.
Oh. It wasn't until he was backing up Mendenhall that they lost, huh?
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't know if he was even on the team when was he on the team when Mendenhall was there?
I think so.
I thought he already left
briefly.
For Washington that year.
Briefly. I'm not sure. We'll have to run it back.
I'm not positive. So until 2009. So
yeah.
Yes, you're right. He was with Mendenhall because 2008 was 2010 was Mendenhall in the Super Bowl. So 09 I think
right before that.
Mendenhall. So
okay, there we go.
Mendenhall for a year.
We'll get there. Yeah.
Yep. this is good.
On the list, I agree with the slotting. I'll say that.
Yes. And Fast Willie Parker, I mean, that was an awesome story as well. He was a guy that we're talking about, those players that come in that 75 to 90 in training camp.
Yeah.
He was an undrafted rookie free agent out of North Carolina that had 0 stats.
Yep.
He rarely played in Carolina, but one of the Rooney's relatives said, you got to give this guy a look because when he gets on the field, he's amazing. And the thing was with him in Carolina, he got screwed. I think they changed coaches 3 times.
Wow.
So he was only featured once, and he was a monster when he was featured. And they're like, well, you're too fast. We want bruisers, or we want something else, went a different direction. But, college football's loss was the Steelers' gain. The guy was an incredible back for the Steelers. He had those huge I think he set the Steelers single game record against the Cleveland Browns when he put up like 247.
Sounds right.
I'm thinking back, and they kept running that same play with who is our our Hall of Fame Alan Faneca, left guard.
Should be Hall of Fame.
Up the right side, he'd get 20 yards off of it every play. And they ran it the entire game. And it was just such it was so degrading for, Cleveland Browns fans to have to watch because it's coming. They don't even have to pass the ball. It's like old school football. We're just going to beat you by running the football all day. And they did.
Sometimes that's all you have to do. But I like hearing about a guy with a weird college career, breakaway speed that comes to the Steelers and lights it up. Are we talking about Willie Parker or Anthony McFarland here, Stryker? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because I was going to stay, even though you just said it.
Yeah.
Anthony McFarland is probably the fastest running back we've had on the roster since Willie Parker.
For sure.
Aside from those mini scat backs that they tried to
Yes, I was going to say let's throw away Chris Rainey and Dre Archer from the conversation.
Those
for
are
sure.
throwaways because weren't really running backs.
Yeah.
So now we're getting to the big three.
All right.
Okay.
I know number three's got to be for the. We'll scroll. It's got to be though. Yeah.
Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah.
And obviously I know he left on a bad note, a lot of sour taste in the Steelers' mouth, but as far as probably being the most talented receiver and running back, complete back, and blocking third down back. I mean, he was probably the most complete running back the Steelers have had in all three of those phases.
You will get zero disagreement from me on that front. I think he's the most talented running back to ever play for the Steelers for sure. People somehow forget how good he was. You definitely need to go rewatch some Le'Veon Bell tape. If, like you said, you have a sour taste in your mouth about Le'Veon, just go watch some of that tape. But
the thing with him too, like he was sneaky good. I'd sit there watching a game of Le'Veon Bell, and we get to the fourth quarter, and they're like, Le'Veon Bell, 125 yards rushing. I'm like, how the hell did he rip off 125 yards rushing? Because as Steeler fans, we're used to like that running back ripping off one big 30 to 40 yard play. And Le'Veon rarely ripped off a play over 25 yards.
Yep.
But I mean, when he's ripping off plays, it's 7 yards, 10 yards, 12 yards, 5 yards, 6 yards. And it's just constant. He's constantly moving forward, constantly gaining that yardage with his wiggle and with his power. So it was weird to watch him play, but he really did bring a lot to the Steelers offense. And those were the best offenses the Steelers have ever had statistically was when Le'Veon Bell was the running back.
Yeah, for sure, man. And he was just a super interesting runner to watch, just his style, that patience. I know the buzzword of patience with Le'Veon Bell, but he really was. His style was so interesting. And he was kind of like, along with Matt Forte, I feel like these running backs that were really reinventing what kind of receiver a running back could be, because Le'Veon explicitly said how he wanted to get paid like a receiver. If he's going to catch 80 passes a year, I'm a receiver then. But I love what Le'Veon Bell brought to the team and his skill set, the way he was very much, in my mind, ahead of the curve as far as where running backs were going. So the Steelers got a gem there. Yeah,
you're right. They reshaped what it was to be the running back position, being, a very, because you had some running backs that were great receivers, but not as good at being a running back. But this was the first time they were great at being a running back and great at being a receiver. And even talking about like Le'Veon went into being paid as a receiver, I've always envisioned like this guy being able to extend his career to become a slot receiver in this.
Yeah,
that's how good he is at route running and getting off the line of scrimmage.
Which is insane to say because he was a 3-down back. Like you said, he's maybe one of the last like 25 to 30 carry a game running backs that the Steelers ever have because of the way the game's shifting. You just don't see that anymore. So to have a guy who we talk about as a realistic slot receiver, I definitely feel like Le'Veon could do that, but he also a 3rd-down back. Like that's crazy.
So now number 2, we know they're number 2, 1 and 2. We got 2 Hall of Famers coming up because we're Steeler fans. We know our guys.
I hope.
So, I know who it should be. I know, but this one, it's like when we just did the cornerbacks. It's like you can't go wrong with who is number 1 and who is number 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
But number 2, let's see who it is. Drum roll. We got Jerome Bettis, the Bus.
Cool.
Honestly, Hall of Famer, awesome story. The Steelers being able to bring that kind of talent in for either a third or a fourth round pick from the at the time the St. Louis Rams to become just the player that Bill Cowher needed to close games. That was one of his little known nicknames, was the closer, because when Bettis got on the field, he was salting that clock because nobody could stop him.
For sure. Warm up the bus. That warm up the bus chant took on a different meaning with him, for sure. I mean, this is the right call for me on the list. I mean, like you said, he came from the Rams, did a lot of work with the Rams, actually. So the fact that he wasn't a lifelong Steeler kind of puts him down a notch if we're doing a Steelers list for sure for me. And similar to Rod Woodson, I still think Rod Woodson should be number one, but especially when you go to the Ravens.
Yeah,
I will hold that against you in a discussion.
I understand the fan perspective on that.
Exactly. So there is that. And plus, I simply think number one was actually a better running back than the bus too, as much as people may not like to hear that. But obviously, the bus should be number two in my mind.
Nothing more perfect too than the arc of his career, because even though he didn't start off as a Steeler fan, you felt his passion, you felt his love for the team and the fans. Yeah. And you knew he was working hard every single day, even when he was hurt at the end of his career. Couldn't walk on Monday. By Sunday, he was out there doing the short yardage and getting those touchdowns for us. And, nothing could make me happier as a fan than to watch him end his career in his hometown of Detroit as a Super Bowl champion.
Unreal storybook ending for his career. And like you said, a dude who deserved it. To this day, he's a great ambassador for the Steelers. Even though, I said about him starting his career with the Rams, even though he wasn't a lifelong Steeler, he certainly feels like it. Like when you think of Jerome Bettis, you don't think of a Rams jersey. You think of a black and gold Steelers, So the bus, great dude, earned this spot on the list for running over Brian Urlacher alone. Yeah.
And also ended up, I think, number 5 all time on the rushing list when he retired. And
something like that.
One point for 1 week, he was number 4.
Nice.
It was always him and
Curtis Martin. Yeah.
Curtis Martin. Yeah. They were always like that. And Curtis Martin doesn't get as much respect around the league as he does too.
Not nearly enough.
Bad teams, but that guy was he was an absolute monster as well, and very Bettis-esque, I'd say, with the ability to churn out that grind out those tough yards. Absolutely. 3 yards in a cloud of dust every time.
Extremely low key, like you were saying about Le'Veon Bell. The game would be over, and you'd be like, Curtis Martin had 140 yards. How did that happen? Yeah.
And then that brings us to number 1. Everybody knows him. Was the reason for the first playoff win in Steelers history in 1972. Franco Harris.
Yep. This is the pick. This is number 1. Whenever you announce the list, I'm like, please, you just got to have Franco number 1. I know it's a big debate between him and the bus, but they're slightly different levels. Both clearly Hall of Fame players, but Franco, we're talking about Super Bowl MVP, multiple time All-Pro, Pro Bowler, just insane talent. Also, a decent receiving back for sure. That wasn't really a thing as much back then, but he could do it. And one thing that gets forgotten, I feel like a little bit, is the Super Bowl MVP year. That whole playoff run was Franco Harris. Like the entire playoff run was run through Franco. They absolutely do not win the Super Bowl without Franco Harris that year. So, and the bus's Super Bowl, all due respect to the bus and everything he did, but that was obviously his last year in the league. He was essentially the goal line back at that point. He wasn't the integral part of the offense like Franco Harris was for so long. So Franco's got to be number 1.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because Willie Parker ripped off the longest run in Super Bowl history with that 75-yarder in the same game. But Franco, 4 Super Bowls, obviously in 2 different eras. He was the load-bearing running back for his first 5-6 years, because it was a running league and teams needed 2-3 running backs to move the football forward. Then the rules came out with the blunt rule, and then it became a passing league, and then Terry Bradshaw showed he could throw the ball and Franco Harris could catch it. So, but just that one stat that I'm looking down here, 9 consecutive seasons being a Pro Bowler.
Wow. That's impressive.
it's difficult for a running back to be that durable, to put that kind of number of seasons in a row to earn the Pro Bowl for 9 straight years, especially with how rugged the game was back then.
Yeah, and especially with a defense like the Steelers, it's not like they were in shootouts. You know what I mean? It was that the offense was run through Franco. He was getting the carries and taking the abuse to burn the clock and manage the clock and everything. So that's an unreal stat, man. That's when you've got that kind of longevity plus the talent. Franco is unquestionably number 1 to me.
And now we've got our last list of the day.
What we got?
The top 10 defensive linemen in Steeler history.
Oh, my.
By our writer, Sean McGowan. Sean, thank you very much for giving us one more list to talk about on this vidcast podcast for SteelerNation.com. And obviously, there's a ton of talent on defensive line. And I think this is probably one of the toughest top 10 lists to do as far as for how much talent the Steelers have. Are they going to have all 4 of the Iron Curtain, plus all the defensive linemen all the way up through, where we have some monsters now with Tuitt and Hayward, and so Joel Steed, and freaking Casey Hampton. So I'm sure we're going to see a lot of these names here coming down through. But number 10, let's see what it is. Number 10, Stephon Tuitt. Now, that is an interesting play. So, we both know he's an amazing talent when he's in. Obviously, injury being one of the toughest things that are really holding him back from being higher on the list. But also, still, he's only been around since 2014. He's still young. He can move up the list. Who knows?
He has time to still prove what he really is. I still feel that Steelers haven't seen it yet. Through 6 games last year, I think he was the best player on that defense last year. He was
an
absolute machine, which is saying something on that defense last year too. Tuitt has to stay healthy, has to prove it. I'm not questioning the dude's talent at all. This is very much like on the running back list, talking about Le'Veon Bell. On a pure talent perspective, there's no question in my mind Stephon Tuitt's top 10. It's just up to him to prove it now exactly how high in the top 10 he goes. So I like it at number 10 because it's safe. It says, hey, we recognize what you are, but you can't go any higher than 10 until you play 16 games.
Yeah. And now that'll move us to number 9 on the list, Brett the Diesel Kiesel.
He's like the anti-Tuitt. That's a funny pick. He's like not as physically gifted or as much of a wrecking machine, but insanely consistent and reliable. He's like the anti-Tuitt. So that's funny and a good pick, man. He was so crucial to so many of those really good Steelers teams. I mean,
I don't know if it's his beard that puts him over the top, but honestly, when Brett started, or when he first started with the team, he was a backup for a long time.
Yep.
But when he finally got the start, he showed he could play. He could make plays. He could get sacks. He could force fumbles. I mean, the guy was disruptive. And of course, he was a run tackle. He plugged holes. He was a monster on that as well.
Perfect for those systems that they were running, absolutely. And another guy to link back to the very beginning of our conversation, a guy who may not have ever made the team if rosters had to be trimmed down to 75 throughout training camp. Very much a story of working himself through, proving himself, and just being reliable. So Brett Kiesel's the man too. How can you not like him?
I know, he's got great personality. Number 8 on the list, another guy. I mean, this guy, Aaron Smith, was, if you had the pleasure of watching him play in the or into the early aughts, I mean, the guy just did everything technically perfect. Wasn't the biggest guy, wasn't the fastest guy, but he's a guy that even Bill Belichick stated, over anyone else on the Steelers defense, you had to plan for Aaron Smith.
Dude, way too low on the list, Sean. Aaron Smith is too low on the list, Sean. I know who's above him. I can think of some of the names for sure, but Aaron Smith was like 5 for me, probably. Yeah. This is way too low.
There's no question to me that he doesn't belong, that he belongs on the top 10 list. I mean, Aaron Smith, absolutely. And that was a reason also why a lot of our playoff years got derailed, because he got hurt.
Yep.
The 1 year entering the playoffs, and then we lost to Jacksonville, and then he got hurt the next year in the Tebow game in the first half. Yep. So we weren't getting to him in the second half, and obviously didn't get to him in overtime.
Yeah, I think it was pec too, kind of like Tuitt, kind of the pectoral triceps issues he
Yeah.
had. So very, very similar in that way. But dude, Aaron Smith, like you said about Belichick praising him, that all of his teammates say the same thing. Any of the Steelers from that era always just praise Aaron Smith, especially Kiesel.
And that's a talented team. That roster is huge. I mean, you got, Hayward, you got the cornerback,
stacked.
The linebackers, which were phenomenal during those.
Stacked, yeah.
But that says a lot. It says a lot to the type of player that Aaron Smith was. So
all right, let's see who you got above him, Sean.
Ernie Holmes, going back to the steel curtain.
The first, they had to start coming at some point.
Yep. So the first player, the first steel curtain member named Ernie Holmes. I mean, you can't go wrong with anybody on the steel curtain line. Ernie Holmes being a huge run disruptor when it was a running league. I mean, he is a huge part of, it looks like 3 of those Super Bowl wins that they had.
Yeah, I mean, he deserves on the list for sure, and he was certainly overshadowed on that team, much like Aaron Smith and Kiesel and those guys, where, you're part of these incredible defensive units. Some people are going to get left out, and Ernie Holmes certainly one of them. The dude, more than just his play on the field, the thing that sticks out to me when I think about Ernie Holmes was his mentality. The ferocity that he brought was definitely a huge factor in that intimidating Steelers defense of the 70s. So his personality, I think, was just as important as his actual play. I'd have a hard time putting Ernie over Aaron Smith, Sean.
I'm with you there. Well, let's move down to number 6 and see where we go.
All right.
Hayward. Now,
fair.
This is obviously a guy that is not only still on a roster, but he is our defensive captain.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, this is a home run pick, and still number 6. You can argue where he is, but his career's not even done yet. So if he takes this team and this defense to the next level with a healthy Tuitt, healthy Hayward, wins the Super Bowl, he could be moving up the list as well.
You can't say enough good things about Cam Hayward, man. Can play anywhere on the line. Like you said, he's a captain. He's a leader in the locker room. He's winning the I can't remember what the award's called now for like the friendliest with the media every year.
Is that the Dapper Dan?
I can't think of it now. It's like might be the Joe Green Award. It's sad.
Okay.
I don't know.
One. I was talking about the local one.
Yeah. No, but regardless, I mean, he's just exactly the model that you would want for the Steelers, and what he's been for this team consistently. He's so underrated.
Yeah.
He doesn't get the respect he deserves league wide at all.
Well, I think he does. He's starting to earn Pro Bowls now. So that's and all pro nominations. So he is starting to get recognized. The problem is it took a while to recognize him. But you've got to think this is a guy playing in a 3-4. So he's one of 3 down linemen. And we know as far as ends or interior, it's like they're lucky to get 7-8 sacks a year. That was Aaron Smith was a monster getting 7-8 sacks a year.
Yeah.
Cam Hayward getting 9-10 plus sacks a year. So that's how good Cam Hayward is. It's like he's taken this whole what it is to be a 3-4 lineman to a whole nother level. And Tuitt even follows that. Tuitt even tracks to hit those numbers if he can play a whole season. But Cam Hayward being the guy that's always there and being locked in for us. I mean, to me, there's no question with his disruptiveness and his ability to force fumbles, his ability to get sacks in situations where we can't send 5. Then that's just a huge bonus for a team of the Steelers that need to get other teams off of the field on 3rd down.
Yep. And seems to elevate his game. Like when Tuitt went down, he came to life more, whereas you thought, okay, this is going to be a problem for Cam because now they're going to be able to key in on him more. He just stepped it up. So I don't know. You can't say enough good things about Cam Hayward.
You can't. So number 5 on the list. Now we're probably going to start seeing some Hall of Famers here soon, but we'll see who comes up. Casey Hampton, big snack himself.
Nice.
Obviously, just like a great person. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to see if there's a picture under it. But like probably the biggest player to ever play for the Steelers defensive line.
I love Casey Hampton, dude. He was so fun. He was so crucial for those teams. Talk about everything Aaron Smith was able to do was a lot because of how much Casey Hampton would clog up offensive linemen and just plug up the middle like crazy. So Casey Hampton's the man. That picture of him, there's a picture of him like dancing at a bar with his shirt off. One of my favorite Steelers photos of all time. Casey Hampton's the man. Definitely top 5. Whenever I first saw the list, I was like, Casey's got to be top 5.
Well, he was a big part for the Steelers making 3 Super Bowls during his era. Obviously, he was the first person to take 2 to 3 players on the opposing team's offensive line out of the play on certain plays. Plus, he could get to the quarterback if you were only putting one guy on him.
Absolutely.
So, this guy was he was a load. He was big. He was athletic, even being at that size. So, one of those guys that probably will never make a Hall of Fame, though he should, because the Hall of Fame does not value nose tackles.
No, he doesn't have the volume stats. Like you said, there's no stat for double teams drawn, unfortunately. So if that was a stat, maybe he would look amazing on that. But he's a hard pick for the Hall of Fame. But I think anybody who watched the Steelers throughout his career would recognize him as a Hall of Fame level talent. Yeah,
honestly, the only way you can kind of see his stats is if you go the next position group behind and look at how dominant the linebackers were between those exact same years that he played.
Yep. And no matter what linebackers they were, basically plug anybody in and they would succeed. Yeah.
They did, because he was eating up everybody in front of him.
Absolutely.
So number 4, Dwight White going back to the Steel Curtain.
For sure.
The 1970s team. Another great player on the line. Now it looks like they're probably going to have all 4 of them now if Dwight White made it too.
They have to. All 4 of them are here. Yeah.
So I think we might be going back to back here in the next couple. But do you know, how much do you know about Mad Dog when he was playing there for the Steelers?
I mean, I've done my research to a degree, for sure. I think he if you're ranking them, the order of the Steel Curtain, the famous line, is correct. Like, he was set the 3rd best, or however you want to put it. Ernie Holmes being the 4th best, Dwight White, and then the other 2 that I'm sure we're about to get to above him. So this is a good spot for Dwight White. It's hard, man. It's really hard to rank those guys because they didn't tally sacks back then. So that stat's out the window. I know some people have gone back and tried to do it themselves, but even still, there's no official count that I've ever seen.
So here in this article, it states that he had 46 unofficial. Now he's from the tackle spot. So, I mean, that's an insane amount of stats to have over a 9-year period.
For sure.
Playing less games than the 16 we play now.
For sure.
They get 46 unofficial sacks. I mean, it shows you how disruptive. Though that just sucked to have to go up against the Steel Curtain anyway, because who do you double team? I mean, you got Holmes, you got White, you got the other 2.
That's what I was going to say.
Probably here soon. And
it helps playing 4-3 defensive tackle for sure, as well as the guys that he was surrounded by. You basically couldn't fail on those teams, man. They were just so stacked that if Ernie Holmes didn't get to the quarterback, Dwight White would. If Dwight White didn't, those 2 guys ahead of him did. You just pick your poison with them.
And now I just have to read this line, because this is the best line to really, show you the type of player that he is and the legacy that he had as a Pittsburgh Steeler. And he famously played in Super Bowl 9 right after being hospitalized with pneumonia and losing 20 pounds in the hospital, recorded a sack for a safety on Hall of Fame quarterback Fran Tarkenton, which were the Steelers' first points in a championship game ever.
Really cool. That's an amazing fact. I love that.
Yeah, so I love hearing the players coming in injured or have a story where they just come back in and they just excel. And that just speaks to the man that Dwight White was. He would not be denied of playing in his first Super Bowl, not only playing in it, but making a crucial play that helped the Steelers start their dynasty.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So number 3, we probably got some more dynasty players coming up here.
Hey, there we go.
Wow.
There we go.
Wow, Ernie Stautner. I love that pick. The guy that was the biggest player before the Steel Curtain started on the defensive line. He was the league knew that the Steelers were a bad team and were afraid to play against this guy. And the Steelers loved him so much and recognized how good of a player this guy was. They retired his number, and he was the only retired number for the entire history of the Steelers up until just a few years ago. And we'll probably be talking about that guy here soon.
I would say that other guy's going to get mentioned at some point. But Ernie Stautner, man, very much like on the running back list, John Henry Johnson. Like, you got to go back and really look at this guy and look at what he did and what he meant for the Steelers in a time when the Steelers just absolutely sucked. Like you said, just what he was able to do for that franchise meant so much. Dude was a beast. I think he's a guy that I could see transitioning kind of into a more modern 4-3 defensive tackle. He has that kind of build or defensive end, excuse me. He's one of those guys who seems like he was ahead of the curve. Like we talked about Le'Veon Bell being like a little bit ahead of the game. Ernie Stautner was a little bit ahead of the game, I feel like, when I go back and look at what he was able to do. So very much deserved. I thought he was going to be number 2 on the list, but I guess somebody else got it. We can probably
I guess so. So now this is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Because it kind of throws out some of the ways I thought this was progressing as a younger person doing a top 10 list for Steeler history. But that's why we're saying this is going to be difficult to put 10 Steelers that we all agree on. So somebody's going to be slighted, and we'll talk about that next then again.
For sure.
But number 2, I expected LC Greenwood to be on this list. Obviously, Stautner is a Hall of Famer. LC Greenwood is still not in the Hall of Fame. A lot of push to try to get him in this past year. But he has the numbers. He was the other disruptive person coming in and getting those sacks on the opposite side of the person who's probably going to be number 1 here on the list.
He should be. LC should be in the Hall of Fame. I definitely feel pretty strongly about that. I watched Super Bowl 10 the other day. It was on YouTube in full, actually. The NFL released it. Dude, LC Greenwood should have been the MVP of that game. He had like 4 sacks in that game. I swear. Like he was just so absurd. And like just talking to my dad and people who were actually able to watch him, a lot of people feel that he may have been the most talented player on that line. You know, we all know who number 1 is, but LC being kind of super underrated. Like it's weird to say that anybody on that defense is underrated, but LC Greenwood is crazy underrated. And you mentioned like the push to get him in the Hall of Fame. What's crazy is that anytime I'd ever heard LC talk about it, he's fine with it. He's fine with not being in. He said, all my teammates are in. That's all the recognition. That's all I need. Like that says it all to me. The fact that we're recognizing everybody else. So crazy character as well. And talk about, you know, Stautner kind of being ahead of the game. LC Greenwood, like I said, go watch the tape. He looks like a modern edge rusher to me. Like he was so far ahead of the game, the way he played, his skill set and size. He's like 6'6". He just built different. Yeah,
different than any other guy at that time. Maybe like Ed Too Tall Jones also being kind of like that lanky defensive end coming in. But I mean, it was really, really like interesting and different to see on a football field at the time before everybody started getting big.
Exactly. So LC number 2, I don't have a huge problem with it. I'd probably put him at 3 and move Stautner up, but still, you can shuffle it however you want. Yeah.
You can't really argue too much with that.
But number 1, I think we can all agree on.
Every Steeler fan knows, because a lot of Steeler fans still rate this guy as the number 1 player in Steelers history.
Yeah. And
obviously got his number retired as well. Mean Joe Green, huge career. The first draft pick by Chuck Noll was Mean Joe Green, and that started the dominance then for the entire cornerstone of the Steel Curtain defense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say about Mean Joe Green, man. We could stretch out another hour podcast out of just Mean Joe Green. I think so. I don't know. Like, I literally don't know what to say at this point. He in a list like this where it's so stacked and you feel like, you know, you can debate. Like, I'm kind of joking around. Like, Aaron Smith needs to be higher and everything, but you can't deny that Mean Joe Green's number 1. Like in a stacked list, he's still by far number 1, and that says it all.
Yeah. And that's the end of the list. We got a nice shot here, the Steel Curtain defense, which is the way to end any podcast, with just remembering the great history that it was that we had here with the Steelers, and it just a fun thing to be able to go through. And unfortunately, thank you very much to our Steelers writers, especially Sean McGowan there for the defensive lineman, Matt Papiernick for the running backs, for giving Alex and I another thing to talk about during this crazy time where we're still trying to hopefully have football coming back here soon.
For sure. Did you just call me Alex, by the way?
Did I? Oh my God. I got to go back. Jeez. Sorry, Hunter.
I'll allow it. You know what? I'll allow it. Call me whatever you want.
Yeah, I know. We'd have enough of these podcasts together. You think I know your name by now?
Yeah.
I'll get it eventually, kid.
It's 2020, man. We can just change our names. We can do whatever we want. This year's crazy.
Well, guys, you guys get it right. You got to follow Hunter on Twitter, on Instagram at Hunter A. Homistek. That's HunterAHomistek. Check out his website right there in the top right-hand corner of his screen, homistek.com. Guy's a hell of a writer. Obviously, you know, he's a hell of a sports enthusiast and he knows his stuff. So follow him and check him out as much as you can. And thank you again too, Hunter, for being part of our podcast.
Of course, man. I love being on these, love debating the lists and getting down and kind of staying plugged into all the Steelers stuff, man. So I appreciate you having me.
Anytime. Hey, Steeler fans, make sure to come over to SteelerNation.com for the best football forum and Steelers news on the internet. Tweet us at Steeler Nation, Instagram us at SteelerNation.com. You can follow our podcast at _SN Podcast. You can follow me at SN Striker. That's Striker spelled with a Y. And also come over to the gear page. Check it out. And this vidcast right here on our YouTube channel, SteelerNation.com. So come over to YouTube and watch the vidcast if you want to see what Hunter and I are looking at as we're going through these lists. This is a fun way to do it. And thanks for joining us at the SteelerNation.com podcast. I'm your host, G.Stryker, with Hunter Homistek, rooting along with you as always. Go Steelers! How do I stop it?